Welcome back to another episode of Marriage Matters with PB&J. We are excited to continue our topic that we were talking about.
Yes.
On the last episode. We dove in a little bit, talking about what happens. We love love, we love marriage and all that, but we were talking about the real deal. What happens when you don't feel those loving feelings, when you don't feel all the little tinglies and the butterflies and all those things, when life happens.
When you think you fell out of love.
Right. There you go. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. You can't fall out.
Yeah, you can't fall.
Right, because you can't fall in. All right. That's
Jeff, you can't fall.
No, you can't fall out.
We got on camera. There's no falling out for Jeff.
No, but you know I ain't gonna fall out.
No, we ain't fall. We falling deeper and deeper every day. But really though, just talking about just the different things that that can happen. Like we said, we got to keep it real. So many people, they struggle silently because they have all these feelings and they think, oh goodness, like I see MeKael and Dorian and they look so in love, but I'm over here. When I look at my spouse, sometimes I get upset or I get angry. I think it's good for them to know, oh, we do too.
Right.
There's times we've heard people have asked us before, like, y'all ever argue? Like,
Yeah.
right, like, just because we're Christians, just because we're, we have godly friends like y'all, just because, we love God and love each other, doesn't mean we're not human.
Right.
We're immune to those things. So we talked about it the last time. This time we're going to dig into some real life scenarios. We in an effort to help and to relate. Let's talk about some stuff. Okay, this first one I cannot relate to, I'm going to be honest. Because this man right here is the finest man I have ever seen in my life. He was fine in 96 when I met him, and he's even finer today.
In 2025.
In 2025, baby, still just gets move my hands.
I hear somebody kicking in the light.
It gets better and better, but this is something that other women have asked me before, so we're going to talk about it.
Okay.
What happens, or what advice would you guys give someone, a man or a woman? I want to hear from the ladies and the men. From somebody who is no longer physically attracted to their spouse.
Well, I guess since you started that question, I guess I'll jump in.
What you get?
I think you have to change the situations for maybe if you feel as if you're not attracted to your spouse, you may need a different setting. Sometimes it's by going on vacation, rekindling the love, maybe dressing a different way, like something that you typically wouldn't wear, just to bring that attraction back, and going on vacation together, going to a remote area. I think that can kind of help and spice things up, and you see them in a different light, because sometimes you can be like, you see it as the mother or someone working, cleaning and like that. So you really don't see that what you was attracted to at first. But sometimes getting away, getting to a different location, and you see her in a different light, then those old feelings, those new exciting feelings.
If I take her to Maui, and she's still looking at me crazy, I'm like, I took Jeff's advice.
But let's say this. Now we talk about communication.
Okay.
How important is it though to communicate to your spouse in front? This is what I need to see from you, because she can take the moo-moos to Maui.
Well, we ain't taking the moo-moos to Maui.
So that's what I'm saying. So how important is it to say, I would love to see this side of you. You're the sexiest I've ever seen, and this and that. But seeing less of the homemaker or the cook, like you said, or the maid and this and that. I want to see you. How important is that to communicate that?
I think it's very important, because one thing you got to think about, because you're in this committed relationship, and then you in love with this person. So you got to think about this. You so in love with this person, but now you want to see that. Can we say sexy?
I mean, why
that side. So you need to communicate that. You say, babe, we're going here. We're going on this trip. We're going to this area, this place. Could you bring this? Could you bring lingerie? Could you leave the moo-moos at home? And it may not even be that extreme. It may be something like that. I love those jeans you wear. Can you make sure you got those jeans packed? Make sure you got that dress packed.
I think too with the communication side is important, but the person that we communicate to got to be willing to receive.
That's true.
compromise a little bit with me, you know.
Yeah.
I don't want to
Work with me.
Yeah. Work with me. I think they have to be willing to receive it.
Yeah.
Because I have heard some people that, you know, they spoken and the other person didn't receive it, you know. But they get, you know, the person has to receive it. And I'm you know, with most men, we're physical. You know, we're aroused by what we see, you know what I'm saying? So, you know, I've communicated with my wife, you know, I think when we got married, I said, you know, I want you to work out. You know, I'm working out. I want you to, you know, to work out, and she does.
Yes, she does.
Yeah, so it's, you know, it's, and then, you know, I don't know. Have you told me something? You may have. Have I? I don't know. But you know, the person has to be willing to receive that.
Yeah, and you gotta also wonder why. Why don't I feel attracted to my spouse?
Yeah.
Is it something that has changed with them or something that has changed with me?
Yeah.
You know, why do I feel this way? Well, if it's something that has changed with them, then why? What did they do? What did they do differently, and why?
Right.
Okay, if it's the woman and she's gained some weight, when why has she gained this weight? What has gone? Has she had a baby?
Right.
Has she just been busy with work and school and this and just busy schedule? Like, get to the bottom of why.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that's important because it could be hormones.
Right.
It could be a medical issue. It could be the baby.
Right.
And so, if it's something like that, you can't be. Well, I don't think you should be so. Oh, you got to lose the weight, or you got to look this way. If it's a medical issue or a baby issue, because once you have a baby, those hormones, and your mind is already, you know, thinking, okay, am I doing this right? Am I being a great mom? You know, I got to cook for my family, do this. Right. So you want to be, I think, a little sensitive when you. It's depending on the situation.
That's good.
That's good.
And I know we're talking about the physical side of it too, but we also gotta be aware of, you know, the emotional side of something. Let's say it was some like some unforgiving, you know, you got some unforgiving in your heart or something, and you don't find that spouse attractive anymore because you got bitterness in it. And so that's something that needs to be resolved too. If you hold resentment, you need to figure out, okay, what's this, and get that resolved so you can move forward with the physical.
So it sounds like you might need to go God first and be like, look, can you show me this?
Yeah.
And I like what you said, MeKael, about making sure you're in tune to the why. Because in our previous episode, we talked a little bit, I think you brought up, honey, external factors and the different things that we're bombarded with all day long with all the media. And really just in a culture where marriage is not elevated like it used to be and respected, I guess. You know, you have to really try to figure out, is this something that I am maybe, is there something in me that is maybe comparing my spouse to another person's spouse? And I'm thinking, well, you're not measuring up to, you know, Joe next door, so I'm not attracted to you anymore. Or, you know, you don't do as much, you're not as chivalrous as much. So just that comparison stage. And even we talked about in the first episode too, your spouse is different. The Robert I have now is a lot more mature than the Robert I had when we first got married. And there may be some things that I miss about the younger Robert, but I'm sure there are some things that I can appreciate in the more mature Robert that will, if I focus on those enough, then they will outshine the other things that I would just compare him to somebody else who just got married yesterday, who is, you know, still trying to be and do all the things and is not as confident and comfortable in the relationship. I'm comparing my husband of 28 years to that person, so there's going to be some differences there. And if you're not aware that that's your why, that's where you're supposedly feeling not so attracted to your spouse anymore, sometimes you will act on it instead of checking yourself and instead of recognizing, well, hey, if I would just not be on social media so much and see all these pop-ups of husbands, you know, presenting the best side of them for whatever page they're posting it to. Because it's just a snippet anyway, like we were saying in the first episode, everyone goes through those seasons where it's not as good as it has been, or where you don't feel as attracted. But if you're committed, you know, if you already have a period at the end of the sentence as to how this marriage is going to be, then you ride that thing out and you focus on the things that are good. Well, I might not be as attracted to, you know, maybe your shape is a little less curvy than it used to be, but let me focus on an attribute of you that has gotten better that I am attracted to. And that helps you to put those other things in perspective to where you don't start acting on them and, you know, making them as big of a deal as they could be.
We call it the fan, remember?
Right.
And the fan is, Jeff mentioned it, is if the attraction has changed, let's check the fan. Because we talk about fanning the flame, then check with any forgiveness issues. Then check with these issues of what can I identify that I can appreciate about my spouse? Because they're probably hearing things that I don't appreciate.
Right.
So I got to make it a practice for the next 30 days. Just keep, you know, validating something that I do appreciate. And then lastly, the end is what need needs to be met. Just find one need and focus on that one need. And being consistent with that need.
That's
So
good.
that's the thing.
That's real good. I think there's so many scenarios. I know for us that, like I said, it's not a personal one, but I know for us, like you said, like bitterness. I know times for me when I have felt, you know, that bitterness, it's just been like, like I ain't gonna say you ugly, but you sure ain't looking cute to me right now, you know, if I'm feeling this situation. So I think that was great. With you all, whether it's a personal scenario or just something you think another married couple may face, what are some of the things that you think may cause somebody to not feel the sparks and stuff anymore?
Well, I would just based on our experience, we have 4 children, and I would say adding children into the marriage definitely shifts the focus a lot. And it could be perceived as you all, you know, falling out of love with each other, or, you know, maybe the mom placing the children before the husband and all of that. So we experienced that 4 times. You know, we brought kids into our relationship, and were there times where we felt like, ooh, this marriage is slipping? Yes, there were times. But I can remember one time very specifically that the Lord so strategically placed somebody in our lives who reminded us how in love we were before we had that handsome little baby and started rocking him and didn't want anybody to keep him. She was like, I have always admired how you guys always did your date nights. You know, whether it was just, let's just go walk around the USM campus or just something small. It didn't always have to be something big, but we always had a date night. And she talked about how much she admired that, so much to the point that when we had our son, she was like, I'm coming to babysit for y'all every Friday. You know, when you guys are ready to leave him, because I don't want you guys to let that spark go out. So it was God placed somebody there to remind us that we know y'all are just so captivated by this little baby. But I want you guys to remember that you guys are the apple of each other's eye. And one thing that tell them what you did with the kids when we first brought them home from the hospital, what you told them.
Set them on the arm of the chair. And we talked about, you took them around the house, introduced them to every part of the house. All right, this is this room, this is what it's for. And then set them down at the end of that walkthrough and said, you know, but you're going to be leaving. And you got roughly this range of years, and you're gonna be leaving. That went really well, and I got to that second child, which was the only girl, and I didn't have that conversation. You can stay. I want you to know that. And she was like, no. I was like, you telling the boy, you know me. And I was like, she can stay. And then when I got to the next boy, did the same thing I did with the first one.
and he would remind those boys, "This is my wife. I know this is your mother, but this is my wife."
Oh, they're going there and kiss.
And one day you're gonna leave me for a younger woman. You're gonna leave your mom for a younger woman, and she's still gonna be my wife. So don't don't drain my wife dry.
Don't be taking my wife through all these other unnecessary changes.
Right.
Because you gonna leave her with me.
Right.
And then she's gonna be worried about you. Then she's gonna want me to spend the money. Trying to fix what you created.
What you created.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the point was, this relationship is the core of this family.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
we'll give you guys the allotted time,
Right.
but at the end of the day, we've got to make sure that this relationship stays intact.
Right.
Yeah.
That's good stuff.
Yeah.
A scenario that I would think of that kind of hints at our relationship is if one of the spouses work is like a lot of hours, maybe an excessive amount of hours. Okay, we can't relate to that directly, but there's a season of the year where he spends more time at the office. Now, if at the beginning of our marriage or beginning of him taking the opportunity, he sat down with me and someone from the company to explain to me how things work. So, and we didn't have children, so I kind of understood that, okay, there may be times when he's working a lot and I may be at home by myself a lot, by myself. And so if you have a spouse and they have a spouse that's working a lot and they're not at home, they're away from home a lot, whether it's traveling or at the office, then that spouse can get some bitterness, like, I'm by myself, I'm doing this by myself.
Right.
I'm a single parent married,
Right.
But if you have that understanding at the beginning, then it kind of eases it up, which we had. And so when the children came along, then it was I knew how to cope. I knew how to deal with that. But if you have that situation where that spouse doesn't have that understanding, I can see where that can be like, if I'm gonna be here all day by myself, I might as well be by myself,
Right.
But what I appreciate when I first got in business, that the guy who was talking about, he sat down with us, and he was like, "I've been doing this for 30 years at the time."
Wow.
And he said, and he talked with both of us, but he was, speaking to MeKael, said, he gonna need your support. He's gonna be, out and working, and you got to support him. So I really appreciate that, cause man, cause I used to be.
Yeah, he's gone.
And you were like single for. But and I just relayed that to another younger guy. He's a young guy in his 20s. Him and his wife just got married. Still in the honeymoon stages. They probably haven't been married for a year, I don't think. About to have a child, and he's in the business. And I was telling him, hey, you're gonna need your spouse's support. Just kind of just pouring it into him, and just. And he was like, I was just telling my wife, I said, y'all call me so we can talk. Because I told him how the gentleman sat down with my wife and I know how that could probably cause a marriage to get off track.
Right.
But you being gone and your wife is at home and you get home 10 o'clock at night, going all day and not having that relationship. You know what I'm saying? But I really appreciate that guy doing that. But I can see how that can get marriages off track.
But you see, what was the most important thing?
Communication. Yeah, that is. And I think it's important too, what you said, to pay it forward. And listen, there's nothing like godly counsel. There's nothing like learning from somebody who's been there before you. Who can tell you, okay, this is what you need to look for. This might happen and that might happen. People go in sometimes, it'll never happen to me. You might need to listen to some folks just to see, because if you know to expect it, if you realize that's coming, then you're not scared. Then you're not as afraid. And you know it's happening. That's like me on roller coasters. If I can kind of watch just a little bit, and I already know I might do it versus just getting on there and I'm just, and I don't know the bumps and the turns and the twists. Maybe. Maybe. Sorry. The Elmo coaster. But I think what I'll just keep it real. But I think when I know what's coming, then it's easier. For one, we can pray about it. You know, you already can be prayed and be prepared for it and be ready for whenever it comes. And that's really what we're trying to do. Just share, you know, our experiences so others can glean from that.
And then I'm gonna say this too about that, because she knew that this is something God was leading me.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So we was in agreement.
Yeah.
We were in agreement. So just be in agreement.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, cause sometimes people will just be working late just to be working late.
Right. Yeah.
Which can cause problems.
Yeah.
You know? But it's no end goal and no purpose.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Right.
So just make sure it's a purpose. You know, if you just working late to be working late, then you know you gotta compromise.
Right. Yeah.
So what do you
Some
do? What do
Yeah.
you do in that situation if that happens within a marriage and a spouse get a job and they're working late, or have they just started a business? You know, you started a business, you might have to put in a lot of hours. And the other spouse is like, oh, I don't know about this. I'm used to this.
Setting up that little bitterness.
Yeah.
So
So what do you do in this situation?
Well, I like the way you guys did it. I
Yeah.
mean, like Dorian was just saying, don't enter into agreements like that hastily and without seeking godly counsel
Right.
from someone
Yeah.
who's done it
That's
and
good.
done it well.
Yeah.
It's not just done it,
Right.
you know, because a lot of people have done it.
Right.
But one thing that made me think about is with all the marriage experience at the table right now, so to speak, there have been instances in the marriage where you had to make a shift and it wasn't something that you could see. Like there have been blows or seasons or just different responsibilities placed in your hand that were not expected.
Right.
You know, maybe you didn't have time to sit down and talk about them. You know, it may have had something to do with a parent or just different things like that that we couldn't predict. And it made me think about the importance of preparing in the good times. Like making sure that your marriage is solid before you start having children or before you make a career move that's gonna cost you guys a lot of time and energy and effort. Just making sure that you're capitalizing on that downtime, on those good times, to solidify your marriage, because you cannot predict every single blow that you will be dealt. But if your foundation is sure, then your marriage you will have already developed the productive habits of communicating. You know, you will have developed the habit of attending to each other and just noticing when something is off, whether that person says anything or not. So I would say a good way to prevent, you know, those feelings from overtaking you of not being in love is when you are in love, you better be on top of it. You know, and don't take for granted times to strengthen the parts that are good, because they're going to be tested.
Right. Almost like bank those good parts. Take those good parts and bank them.
I like that.
Make the deposits. For us, we're on the same team. And we want to win. So if I am feeling some kind of way, going back to what we said, I'm going to communicate it to you, because how else we going to win? You know what I'm saying? How else we going to get over it? How else we going to do this? If I am, you know, whatever, if I'm feeling that, and I think, and you're great at that with me too, coming to me and saying, you know what, you said this and it made me feel this way, or just whatever. And it's remembering, what's the goal? Our goal is our goal is to have a godly marriage. So we're going to talk, we're going to communicate. I'm not going to be hurt if you say, put the road down and put, you know, do this and do that. Because again, like, I'm not going to be offended, because this is for us. This is you telling me your heart and helping us, helping me help you help us. So I'm gonna do whatever it is I need to do and not be offended.
And it's so much power in being not only communicating. It's so much power being on one accord. You know, even though some of it may take compromise, but when you take a couple and you're on one accord about everything, even about intimacy, even about doing this or put this on, whatever it may be. It's so powerful, and it just changed, and it keeps the relationship.
That's it. We could go on and on and on, but I think the time is ticking, so we're gonna have to wind down soon. Any closing remarks? Anything that you have for the people before we wrap this one up?
Great subject today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
Great
Yeah.
insight.
Yeah.
Great subject.
I think it's coming, and that's our goal, to keep talking about things that are coming to, you know,
Right.
to everybody, and then to
Oh, yeah.
keep sharpening each other, because we all need it.
Right.
I'm grateful for a community
Yeah.
that's, you know, people filled with people like y'all, like to keep
Yeah.
sharpening
Right.
us and pouring into us and stuff too. So get you a community. If you don't have a community, pray about a community and let the Lord lead you to the right people. Don't go out and just pick anybody.
That's
Let him lead you to the right people, and then relish that relationship and foster that relationship with
Yeah.
others.
Yeah.
All right, y'all. I think it's a wrap.
Yeah, and guys, thank you for joining us for another episode of Marriage Matters with PB&J. One word that just rang loud and clear for me tonight was communication. So what I want you to do, write in the chat, communication is key. And as you do that, like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And until next time, your marriage matters.